Hello, friends. Today we're going to be talking about Venus in the sign of Libra. The ingress will be on October 13th. However, this video will apply if you have this placement in your chart. And I'll come back to talk about some of the aspects Venus is going to make while in this sign. However, it's a smooth transition. We're going to get a square to Jupiter, but that's basically the whole sum, and it's two benefics. So it's nothing like the way Venus was in the sign of Virgo. And if you want to be notified on the upcoming transits, please subscribe, press the notification button. But for today, we're going to be talking about a Venus that just went from its debilitation to being fully dignified in its own sign. It's a benefic having a homecoming. But it's important to remember, we have a lot of stereotypes about certain signs, and we have a lot of stereotypes about the sign of Libra, which is that Libra is about relationships, charm, or elegance. But there are a lot of deeper themes here. That's why I encourage you to stick with the video. What we'll be talking about is the existential nature of desire in itself, which gets expressed in this sign. It's about what it truly means to connect with other people, what's required. And it has a lot to do with us getting rid of our distortions in terms of how we establish connections, so they're not based on unhealthy dependence. It's about showing up in relationships and partnerships in general as an equal partner. So today we're really going to dig deep below the surface description of this placement. And just to give you guys a rundown of how I organized this video, first we'll be talking about what it means for Venus to be in its own sign. And then I want to talk about the Kāma, or the pleasure principle, that's a component of this placement. I also want to talk about the shadows of this placement. Even when we have dignified and exalted planets, we don't come into this world dignified and exalted. We have to learn. These archetypes mature within us over time. And lastly, we're going to talk about some life lessons we can extract from this symbolic interaction, whether you have this again in your birth chart or through this transit. And this video is timestamped for your convenience, so feel free to jump back and forth to different topics. And without further ado, let's get right into the first point, which is Venus in its own sign of Libra. As I just briefly mentioned, the first thing that we have to remember is that Venus is in her own sign, her own domicile, which means Venus is powerful and dignified. So when we talk about planetary dignity, this is one of the components. Is the planet in its own sign, in a friend sign, in an enemy sign, exalted, debilitated? All of these factors determines dignity. And what this means, when a planet's dignified, it has the capacity and the ability to express its full potential. The next thing that we have to remember, Venus is part of the feminine principle. That's how it's operationalized, which means it's about being receptive and cooperative. And it's this receptivity and its cooperative nature that allows it to have partnership, whether if it's romantic or platonic. Even business partnerships fall into this domain. In general, the function of Venus under the feminine principle is about taking in, creating, emerging, so that a unit of expression is created. Venus has a lot to do with unity and unifying things. And that receptivity of Venus is also related to aesthetic components, from creation of beauty to arts, cosmetics, and fashion. Another thing worthy of remembering is that Venus represents our sense faculties. So Venus is related to the five senses. So it includes all the sensual pleasures of this life. We have to look at Venus always in our chart. Do we have the capacity to enjoy things or not? And Venus is also related to sexual enjoyment and fertility. And lastly, Venus is very much related to peace, harmony, because it has this cooperative nature that is trying to harmonize all the parts so that they can come together and unify. But if you're familiar with astrology, right away you can see that there's something funny happening here. Because Venus itself is of the feminine principle, but the sign of Libra is a masculine sign. And this means that Libra, while Venus has this receptive taking in quality, Libra has an externalizing quality. So Libra is telling us right away that, yes, this receptive internal component of Venus is coming to be operationalized in a sign, the masculine version of its sign, so that the interiority can establish connections with the external world. And this is very different than Venus's other sign, Taurus, which is a feminine sign. It's an earthy sign, it's very receptive, and it's very much grounded in the body and the material. But Venus in Libra is cerebral. It's intellectual, it's relational, and it's outwards. So Venus in its masculine sign is moving out in the social sphere of life. And its aim is to create exchanges and to establish connectivity between parts, which is us human beings. And we do need the intellect part to connect with other people. We'll get deeper into this. However, it's important to remember that even though Libra is a masculine sign, it has enormous amount of sensitivity in it. And this sensitivity is related to a keen understanding about what it means to have equality, equilibrium, and balance between things. Libra has a lot to do with fairness. And if you think about it, we have a beautiful composition when all the parts are balanced. And if you think about it, the sign of Libra is a scale. So it's balancing things, it's weighing things, it's measuring things, and trying to find out where is that equilibrium so that the two parts are in fair exchange, fair connection, partnership. So we could think of Libra as an environment that is constantly trying to create an equal atmosphere for all parties involved. So Libra in many ways becomes a sign of discernment, but not the discernment of Virgo where it keeps separating the parts to see how they are different. And the sign of Libra is about understanding the different parts and then being like, how are they similar so I can bring them and connect them to each other, unify them. Libra has a great sense of what's right and wrong in terms of what is just and unjust. So in many ways, we can say that Libra is one of the most socially intelligent signs. And if we're going to think about intelligence in general, there are 3 signs that are related to intelligence. And they're all air signs: Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. But the one that is most socially apt, it's actually Libra. Socially, like Gemini is good with one-on-one. I'm talking about in a social context. Libra takes the trump card. And air in general is related to intelligence. It gives us the power of discernment. For example, when we come to Libra and we're talking about the project of civilizations, for example, as humans becoming more civil, more humane, having human rights, charter of rights, these are related in Libra. The sign of Libra understands the collective and the significance of social relations in that dynamic. Like, for example, when we talk about the abolitionist movement or UN Charter is related to Libra. Like, for example, when we think about it, we've become accustomed to think that human rights is a given, but they're actually the byproduct of our social intelligence. 100 years ago, people used to pack their picnic on the weekend, on Saturday, and go watch someone getting executed, which, like, if you think about it today, that would be pure trauma. So we have progressed as human beings to understand the evolution of our social dynamic. And the sign of Libra is a significator of that. And if we think about this, Libra is constantly trying to establish equal power relations. It wants distribution of power. It doesn't want hierarchy of power that's vertical. It's looking for power relations that's horizontal. And this is precisely why Mars is in its exile, and it does so poorly in the sign of Libra, as well as the sun, because there's the center, I am the authority, I am the king. They're more individually oriented. Whereas Libra is socially oriented, is about distribution of power, not the center of power. And then on the other hand, Saturn gets exalted here. Saturn is about power for the people, by the people. It doesn't want a central figure. But I'll stop here right now, otherwise this video is going to be 10 hours long. But let's think more through this air quality to see what else it represents. If you think about it, air is invisible, but it's everywhere. The movement of air permits transmission and conveyance of information, whether if it's pollination of the bees or the radio wave. It's what permits the nexus between different parts. And this is why the element of air is equated to thoughts, hence that intelligent component. It's related to communication, which is that transmission again, right? Which allows us to establish connectivity. Sorry, my voice was going. And if we take the Vedic traditions, for example, air is connected to the prana, which we are talking about the breath of life, which is essentially the life force that sustains the body and links it to consciousness. It's something like an interface that keeps your body connected to your consciousness. And since air represents movement, sorry, now I have something on my chin. We're having a day. You know, while I'm recording this, that Venus is opposing Saturn. We're going to make the best of this. And another thing, as I was saying, since air represents movement, it also denotes freedom and openness. So it can cross boundaries, it can flow around obstacles, and it can connect distant parts together. But when we talk about the element of air, there's a component to air that has a negative side because it can be unstable, it can be scattered, it can lack grounding, predictability, consistency. This is another reason why the sun is debilitated here. The sun is that central focal point that's so consistent. And then it comes into an air sign, you get scattered. And we hear this through the general stereotypes that people have about Libras, which is that they're superficial or they're indecisive. And if there are those qualities, if it's not a stereotype, it's coming from this over-exaggerated air component of the sign. And because, as I was saying earlier, air has to do with intelligence, even though Venus has to do with love, and even though Venus is in her own domicile, let's go back to that masculine aspect of Libra. There's a cerebral component to love, relationships, beauty, cooperation. So you're thinking through it. You're not necessarily feeling through it. You would be in the sign of Taurus. But in the sign of Libra, it's a very thinking-oriented sign. So this means that Venus in the sign of Libra is always trying to establish bonds through very thoughtful dialogues. It's always thinking to understand, well, what's fair for everyone here? What's the best situation for everyone here? It wants relationships to be fair. So there's an inclusive intellect at play. And this inclusivity and the thinking process is always about what's the middle point? Where is that fulcrum where everything can be balanced on both sides? So people who have Venus in Libra, consciously or subconsciously, they're always trying to understand, well, what's our shared value here? And this is also contributing to that stereotype that they might be indecisive. They're not indecisive. They're actually trying to take your viewpoint into consideration. This is what we call being nice. But it goes deeper than that because ultimately they want to establish some sort of a ground where it's good for everyone. So we can see in Libra, we're not just talking about the body's desire, like the way we can get in the sign of Taurus, that wants to feel safe, secured, and anchored, or its exaltation in Pisces, where Venus actually has the luxury to merge pretty indiscriminately. It's like free to just create oneness. Venus in Libra has to build partnerships that are equal, equitable, reciprocal, fair, and just. This is a hard thing to do in life. And there are no shortage of selfish people, so this is a hard task at hand. Whether if it's at work environment, with our business partner, with our relationship partner, friendships, this is an art in itself. And Venus has a lot to do with diplomacy. Mercury does too. But Venus is the art of this diplomacy, whereas with Mercury is the skill set. So in a lot of ways, Venus in Libra shows us what's required for love to reach its highest potential, which is when relationships are based on equality. And that means having equal recognition of what every party is bringing to the table. I mean, what's the biggest grievances of people in relationship? What I do goes unrecognized. They don't see how I'm contributing. This creates a lot of conflict. So Venus in Libra is allowing us to see how everyone's doing their parts. They're bringing theirs, and everything has its own value. So all parties are being honored. And in this way, people can feel dignified and have their own respectful place. No one feels excluded, left out, violated, or the worst feeling that you're in a partnership where things are unjust, because that creates rage, that can create resentment. So Venus in Libra is mitigating these kinds of negative dynamics and feelings. And the question is, why does Venus want to do this? And we might take this for granted. Well, this is what Venus does in the sign of Libra, but why is it that Venus has been tasked this job to do this in the sign of Libra? Well, Venus's own nature is about cooperation, creating a sense of peace and harmony, and merging the parts, as I mentioned earlier. So if you have a unit of expression that's functional, you have healthy organisms. Society can be healthy. Partnerships can be healthy. And Venus represents health. I've said this in a couple of videos now. It's because all the parts are connected and they're working. That's what beauty is. It's denoting health. So we're talking about health of culture, health of society, and relational dynamics. And just as food for thought before we move to the next topic, I want you to think about the 3 places that Venus does best. And this can tell us how the Venus in us can become enlightened, how we can nourish Venus within us. I do a lot of chart reading where there's a lot of misunderstanding about the 2 benefics. People actually have more gravitation towards the malefic planets. And that's because they're explicitly feeling the hardship of life. But to actually nourish this Venetian quality, and hopefully in one of the videos soon, I'll talk about Jupiter also, is to think about Venus in the sign of Taurus. In the sign of Taurus, Venus, that merging, connecting component of it, is allowing us to merge and unify with the material aspects of life, which maintains the material component of ourselves, which is our body. It allows us to feel embodied, anchored, secure. And when we have that feeling, we have a sense of being alive, wanting to engage. That's creating a sense of fertility in life, where it gives rise to creativity, for example. And then we have Venus in the sign of Libra. We can learn from this, which is telling us now that embodied, secured, anchored self can connect with other people and to the world. And that is the best state, to connect with other people. When we feel insecure, we start to project a lot of things. We do things that are unjust. We do things that are unfair because we're coming from an insecure place. So Venus is telling us, when we feel embodied and good in the sign of Taurus, then we show up into the world with that sense of fullness. And then what can we learn from Venus's exaltation in the sign of Pisces? That essentially, if we can connect with ourselves and we can connect with the world, then we can have that transcendent feeling of having a sense of oneness with existence itself. It's a progression, step by step. We don't just skip the self and go to the other and then go to the notion of the higher being or the higher consciousness. It's incremental. So we can learn from Venus's function on how to nurture and what's actually important in terms of the Venus within us. But now let us move on to the next section, which will add to our understanding of what this sign and this placement is about. And the way I want to approach this right now, in Vedic astrology, we have 4 goals of life, which includes dharma, artha, Kāma, and mokṣa. So going from the first house is dharma, second house is artha, third house is Kāma, fourth house is mokṣa, and then they repeat again. So this pattern of 4 repeats 3 times. And the signs, based on their elements, will also have these goals of life. So all of the fire signs are dharma, which is your sense of purpose and having moral fiber in life to do the right thing based on what you're made of. Artha, which is of the earth elements, is about building wealth, that's foundation and that stability. So the signs that are of earth are related to artha. Kāma is related to all the signs that are of the air elements, which is denoting pleasure. How do we extract pleasure? How do we have our desires met? And also the water element are all mokshas. It's about how do we become enlightened so that we can actually get to a point where we do not suffer in this life, where we have an ultimate liberation from the material condition of life being embodied in this material container. A video I'd love to make later on and really getting into this. But what I want us to remember, Libra is an air sign. So it makes its goal of life one of Kāma, which is about pleasure. How do we meet our desires so that we have an experience of pleasure? And we got to remember, when we desire something, it creates a feeling of longing within us. And what follows is this urge to want to have it fulfilled. And when it's fulfilled, that's when we feel pleasure. So in other words, Kāma is always about having an object of desire and the yearning to have its fulfillment. And in the same Vedic tradition, Venus is a rajasic planet. It's desirous, so it's always involved in the activity. And what's the activity? To fulfill these desires, to have a sense of pleasure and enjoyment. And then I'm sure some of you guys have heard of Kāma Sutra. So it's the art of how to have pleasure. And we have to remember here, going back to that masculine principle, because Libra is a masculine sign of Venus. So the Kāma of the sign has that masculine slant to it. And please don't take masculinity and femininity the way that we talk about it. They're existential principles that operationalize the existing factors of this world, and all of us have it within us. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because, again, through our stereotype common understanding of the feminine and the masculine is seen as the go-getter. It can even be stoic. And that pleasure principle is always related to the feminine. But I want you to actually think about this for a second. How much of this Kāma component is actually related to the masculine principle? For example, what makes us get up and act towards many things in life? Things that are outside the parameter of absolute necessity. What makes us initiate to go get things, to build things? These are the masculine qualities in us. Again, Doesn't matter if you're male or female. We all have this. We all have dreams, ambitions. We want to just go out there and do things. And if you think about it, what's propelling it, what's underneath it is our desires. And those desires are coming from a longing that needs some sort of a fulfillment. That's what's allowing us to initiate, to act, and to go after things. That externalization of the self, which is related to the masculine principle. And if you think about it, even one step further, Kāma, or the need for pleasure and the fulfillment of it, is actually what's creating karma. It's what actually propels karma. And karma here meaning action. This is how existence itself is in motion. So it's telling you something about the nature of existence itself having desires that wants fulfillment. To bring it down to our level, the world moves because there's Kāma. And because there's Kāma, there is karma. Now we also get not only karma as action, but karma as cause and effect. And it's all being propelled by our need to meet our desires. So Kāma in some ways is the way that we remain in motion and how existence remains in motion. Because we like to knock down pleasure. I'm getting deep into this rabbit hole because I see this often that you are enlightened if you can refrain from having pleasure, having the stoic mindset of how much pain can you keep, how much pain can you work through, how much chaos and insanity can you go through. But if you think about it, pain is denoting things that are not connected, things that are disintegrating. That's why there's a feeling of pain. Kāma is actually showing us where things are coming together, integrating, becoming whole, and working. So I don't want us to knock this pleasure aspect that's in this sign. It's a propulsion system that propels us to act. And through that action, we also become the agents of change and transformation in existence, which is also the nature of existence. So Kāma prevents us from being passive agents. And I want us to keep that in mind and really let it sink when we say that Libra people or people who have placement in Libra or passive. They are not passive. They're doing something very deep. So they're not just thinking about how do I set myself in motion. It's thinking about how do I do something where we are in motion. There's profundity. So it might take time. It might require a little bit of back and forth, looking like they're being indecisive, but that's not what's happening underneath it. And I want us to keep in mind that when we come into the sign of Libra, the Kāma aspect of it is a longing for relational connections. It's the longing and the desire for cooperation, for union, for companionship. So the Kāma aspect of Libra is not solitary. It's a collective pleasure. It requires another person or other people. And in Libra, Kāma can manifest, pleasure can manifest, desires can manifest in a few ways. For one, we have a sense of deep and great pleasure when we have unions that are based on cooperation, not coercion, not manipulation. So it's talking about this deep desire to establish connections that are equal, balanced dynamics with other people. It's this desire to want to experience oneself through the gaze of the other. But oh my God, if the other is not your equal, seeing yourself through the gaze of a person who resents you, who are power tripping, is one of the worst experiences a human being. So think about the degree of beauty Libra is looking for, and Venus in Libra, to see itself through the gaze of another that is equal to itself. Itself is equal to it. And that is the true experience of joy and peace. The kind of togetherness that we all yearn for. This is its best version. Kāma of Libra can also be related to reciprocity. So a give and take that's fair and just. Because a lot of people will say, I just want to be loved. They forget the other part of the equation, that I equally want to love. So in Venus in Libra, we're talking about fair love, relationships that are mutual. So Libra is not just seeking pleasure for itself. It wants all parties involved to feel pleasure. They want to have their own desires met, but they also want you to have your desire met. That's the ultimate pleasure of Venus in Libra. We can also talk about this Kāma aspect when it comes to the aesthetics of things. We're talking about elegance and refinement. There's a desire for that. And if you think about it, or if you research a bit, you'll see a lot of artists who have the two benefics in Libra, either Jupiter or Venus. And I want you to think about what makes a good artist. And let's take an actor as an example. A good actor is not a person who knows how to deliver their line. They just said that so magnificently. But is an actor who knows how to come into relation with the person that they're acting with. They can deliver that line, not in a vacuum, not in isolation, but as a response to the person that's standing in front of them. So they're creating that aesthetic beauty, and they're able to convey the message because they know how to establish this beautiful relational dynamic. So in a lot of ways, when we talk about the Kāma of Libra, the pleasure and the desire in the sign, and especially with Venus here, we're talking about pleasant, equal, fair exchanges. It's about the ability to have shared social spaces, because Libra has a desire to transmit, and through that transmission connect, that air element that's here. And if we think about shared social experiences that we can also transmit to other people, we're talking about culture. So Venus in Libra can denote culture itself, the making of it, the engagement with it, the pleasure and the enjoyment of being human. That's part of it, that we have culture. So as you can see, Libra's Kāma and that sense of pleasure and desire that is here, it's not superficial. It's not about indulgence. It's purposeful. It's refined, and it's about refinement. Venus in Libra is longing for this concept of us and we, not me. Again, this is why Sun and Mars are problematic here. Topics for another day. But we can see, topic for another day, but we can see that Libra is our cure for not having a sense of loneliness, that sense of aloneness. And I want you to think about Aries on the other side of the axis, across Libra, where it is very individualistic. It's about, how do I get things? How do I do things? It's about meeting one's own personal desires, that passion that's in the sign of Aries. In Libra, that Kāma pleasure aspect is coming through cooperation, equality, and connection. Pleasure is in companionship, that are equal, fair, and balanced. And as we pass through the years and we get another black belt degree of life, as we get to our advanced ages, we come to realize so much of life's beauty is in the companionships that we have. How are we able to speak with other people? How can we just be ourselves, unfold and unwind, and we don't feel fragile because we're in these power dynamic relationships that are unequal, unfair, and unjust. This is one of the most important aspects of life. And I always mention this in all the videos, to understand how this Venus in Libra is unfolding in your chart, whether through the transit or because you have the signature in your natal chart. Look at where Libra is sitting in your birth chart, which house, because you're working through these themes, through the themes of that house. It's bringing people that pertain to that house to create this narrative and to give you a sense of understanding about these components of Libra and what it means to have Venus here. And some of the things that this placement will be telling you in your chart is, what does fairness and harmony look like to you? What is it demanding of you to learn these lessons? What are you expecting to receive from others? And equally, what are you willing to give? Like, if this is in the house of your career, it's talking about, you're here in this life because you're trying to figure out how to do this in your house of career. So we're learning something about balanced relationships, and a little bit of self-inventory can show us, like, are we a little too individualistic, self-oriented, or do we have these great amounts of dependency that is actually not healthy? And this also brings me to the next section, which I do want to talk about some shadow aspects of the sign before this archetype and these functions evolve, grow, and mature within us. And yes, as I mentioned earlier, dignified planets and even exalted planets can have shadow points, because we are these entities who are constantly becoming and maturing. And then sometimes, you know what, we think we matured up and then we get into another situation. But because we don't have the explicit experiences that are required for this new situation, we make the same mistakes again. So it's just like an ongoing process. We're always growing. But the shadows in Libra. Shadow point number 1, dependency. And this is to have the desire to be in a relationship at any cost, even if it means losing yourself. And again, remember, Aries is on the other side, because we're supposed to create some sort of a balance in the spectrum of Aries Libra. It's about compromising with others at one's own expense. When people say again that Libra people are indecisive, sometimes this has something to do with it. They're waiting to see what another person wants, as if they don't have a need themselves. That's not the point here. You're supposed to have them, and you're supposed to understand other people's needs also. and then meet in the middle, compromise, cooperate, harmonize, till you have a balanced footing for everyone. So this dependency can be like, you don't know where you begin and end, and you don't understand where another person begins and ends. The solution here for this over dependency that can come from the sign, because that longing and desire to be with other people, is to understand that your needs are just as important as other people. This is one of the things that we need to mature and grow within. Shadow number 2, people pleasing. And this is when we confuse harmony and equal power relations with this avoidance for conflict. We just can't handle conflict. This is when we just silence our own voice just to keep the harmony. Again, remember, Aries is on the other side. It's the sign that belongs to the god of war. And this axis is a spectrum. We have to understand how to balance it. So we can't have superficial harmony. And this is one of the bad reps of Libra, which is usually expressed as like, they're so nice that it almost feels fake. And there could be an element of that because a person has not matured what it means to have Venus in the sign of Libra. Sometimes a little bit of conflict, butting head, like the ram in Aries, going back and forth, is necessary to establish some sort of an equilibrium, to equalize the power relations so that the situation is fair for all. Shadow number 3, it's about aesthetic illusion. So this is about mistaking superficial level beauty or the appearance of things for the depth of what it means for something to be beautiful. And again, beauty is denoting health. Health is saying that all the parts that are connected, they're connected in proportion, in balance. They are working. So the depth of beauty, the essence of it, is actually talking about that which is healthy, life-generating and life-promoting. I've said this in a recent video about Venus too. But if we want to be on the surface level, some of the outcomes can be entering relationships and being with partners where there's a sense of elegance. But then that relationship might lack substance. Connections can be with thoughts, abstraction, like the status of things, rather than with real people. Or this whole being on the superficial level of things is to have this need for the objects of the world to mediate our social relations. Like, if I have this purse, then I can have this relational dynamic with these groups of people. Is that dynamic and is that connection? Does it have substance? If it does, great, get the purse and go do it. But if it's just going to keep it at superficial level, it's not the highest expression of Venus in Libra. And shadow number 4, loving people on a cerebral level. And this can happen because this is an air sign, even though Venus is so loving. It's being operationalized, and it is its own sign, but it is an air sign. So we can keep everything on the realm of the intellect rather than having the heart feel it deeply. So what this can do is that we move from one attraction to another, swipe right, swipe left, swipe, 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 because I definitely don't want to give this a thumbs up. What does it do if I give a thumbs down? There we go. Give me a thumbs down. But getting back to our point. So it's just the inability, because we're not feeling with our heart, we're thinking about it. We're unable to ground ourselves and to commit deeply. The air element, I was saying, it can be like, it can lack commitment. It can be unstable. It can come through in this way as one of its shadows. Even with Venus here, because it can make it actually kind of lusty and just thinking about it, that person's cute. That's hot, that's not. So we've got to be aware. So again, we don't want to be talking about surface desires and attractions. What we want to do is that, yes, we want to have that discerning component in terms of what's required for our connections, but we also want to nurture a devotional heart. At some point, we got to be able to commit and not just explore anymore. So that was the last shadow. And we can see that we're talking about Venus in Libra, its own sign, with great amount of dignity. But before there's a sense of maturity, we can feel compelled to gravitate towards a more transient aspect of the sign, which is related to that air element, to that Kāma component. We're being tempted by pleasures that don't actually have substance, desires that don't add up to much in the long haul of life. It's instant gratification. We can be tempted to choose appearance over substance and essence, but that is all before there's a sense of maturity. When there is, this is one of the most beautiful placements. It's what makes us human, full humans, full-fledged, humane humans. This video is getting super long. And you know what? Let it be, because This is what I've noticed. When I do the videos about malefic planets and a lot of hardships, there are so many viewers, so much more than when we talk about this kind of a placement. But we take it for granted. This is what I was saying earlier, that there are so many misunderstandings about the benefics. When we think about our lives, whatever situation that in, let's say we just had a breakup. Let's say we just had a person that we loved pass, and let's say our finances are in a very unhealthy situation. So we have three things wrong, but look what the benefics are doing in the rest of our lives. And most of the times we are not dealing with these three issues all at once. Usually it's one at a time. But when you think about the roof is staying on top of your head, the ground beneath your feet has not cracked. You don't even have a paper cut, because when you get a paper cut, you're just distracted by the pain. You can't do anything. You didn't break a bone. Your plumbing didn't just burst. Something just didn't crash through your window and hit your head. Like almost everything goes well. You step into an elevator and the thing goes from the 60th floor to the first floor. So most of the times, so many things in our life are going right, but we take it for granted. So I'm going to say, so what, that this video is running longer, because we have to cultivate this appreciation for what is good in life. It's like the way we're addicted to bad news. There's no such thing as good news anymore. And you know what? It's understandable, because our brain is these predicting machines, and we need to constantly evaluate what might be dangerous so we can negotiate it. But I think it's also good to cultivate the recognition of what is good and benefic in our life. And I'll stop there. I'm actually going to take a very short break. I'll come back and we'll talk about the soul lessons and we'll wrap this video up. All right, guys, I'm back. Last part, the soul lessons. And it's pouring outside. It was so freaking cold, but I guess it should be. If it was like super hot right now in the northern hemisphere, we should be worried. But we got to remember that Venus in the sign of Libra has a lot to do with Kāma and pleasure of life. So we're talking about that existential nature of desire, which is to say, true desire is fulfilled not by blind merging, but in deep reciprocity, cooperation, and sharing. It's in being in relational dynamics that are balanced and just. So Venus in Libra is asking us, whether through transit or natal placement, can you stay rooted in yourself while joining another person? Can you honor yourself and not get lost in the dependency, but always take the other person's perspective into consideration? And the bottom line lesson here is that what we value the most in this life is harmony and peace. That's what permits life to flow. But love without fairness, equality, and reciprocity always collapses. But when fairness and recognition are present, connection and the beauty that's in those connections, which is life-generating and it's healthy, become lasting. Connections become real and fulfilling, so that Kāma aspect of the sign is fulfilled. We're fulfilled. So Venus in Libra is talking about the art of love, a prominent philosophy that we should all cultivate about the nature of life and what it means to be human. It's the image of partnership as a dance, where two partners, whether it's friendship or a romantic relationship, we move in proportion. We balance each other out. We're attuned to the other person and allow the other person to attune themselves to us. So we're receptive in that way. We don't overpower people. We don't erase other people. And we also don't erase ourselves. So the gift here is the ability to establish harmony, to find peace and delight in fairness, which fairness is delightful, because everyone is getting to have an experience that has a sense of fullness. It's dignified. And if you think about it, when we are in beautiful dynamics, when our heart feels at ease, when we have that sense of peace, we have the ability to bring beauty into the world. Again, that social component of Libra. And before signing off, if you like the content of this video, please do remember to like, subscribe, and comment. And please let me know how this Venus is going to go for you in the sign of Libra, especially after that debilitation in Virgo, which was crazy with, the eclipses, the K2 conjunction, and then the Saturn opposition. It was like a moment of hell. Now Venus has its own homecoming, and I'm very much looking forward to see how you guys are experiencing this. And I'll share my experiences in the comment box too as the days pass by. And if you want to have your own personal chart reading to know what all the placements in your chart means, because yes, these transits will tell us the mood and the mode of the day, but how they're actually being operationalized, we have to look at your birth chart. So for that, you can go to the link in the description box below or to parisayazdi.com, and all the process and what you need to do and what I do for you guys is there, as well as how to contact me. And I'll leave you with this. May this transit remind us that love at its highest point is an act of balance, of giving and receiving, of seeing and being seen. And may our connections be guided by fairness, truth, and beauty that grows from authenticity. And wherever Venus touches our chart, may it teach us the graceful art of harmony, the kind that allows our soul to remain whole while we move with others. And may we take care of our peace so that we can become the peace bearers for others. And that's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.